So in 1956, Tolkien was approached by an American producer by the name of Forrest J. Ackerman, and he wanted to make a 3-hour Lord of Rings animated movie, which sounds kinda awesome nowadays. And even Tolkien wasn't completely opposed to the idea.
An abridgment by selection with some good picture work would be pleasant and perhaps worth a good deal in publicity, but the present script is rather a compression, with resultant overcrowding and confusion, blurring of climaxes, and general degradation, a pullback towards the more conventional fairy stories. People gallop about on eagles at the least provocation, Lorien becomes a fairy castle with delicate minarets, and all that sort of thing.
So they sent Tolkien a storyline document, and Tolkien criticized it, and you can actually read most of his criticisms in the Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien. And I went through that and just collected some of the most interesting or hilarious quotes that Tolkien had in reaction to this script. You have to see that during that time, Lord of the Rings wasn't as popular as it is now, or even 10, 20 years later. It was kind of small. Lord of the Rings got really popular when American publishers printed like illegal copies without a license in America and threw out paperbacks, which Tolkien didn't like. And that's what made it really popular in the 80s in North America. But yeah, during this time, Tolkien was pretty interested in getting more eyes on the Lord of the Rings, on his story, which he was, to a certain extent, proud of, even though he has this tsundere attitude of always being, I don't really know why even anyone cares about my books. It's just a silly side project. It's not all my heart and soul went into this. It's just a silly pleasure project.
But this Mr. Ackerman brought some really astonishingly good pictures and some remarkable color photographs. They have apparently toured America shooting mountains and desert scenes that seem to fit the story. The storyline or scenario was, however, on a lower level, in fact bad.
So yeah, they brought him some illustrations and some photos of beautiful American nature, and Tolkien really appreciated that and could actually imagine a movie set in this kind of setting or inspired by this art. And then he read the storyline and was like, oh fuck, what the hell, why the hell is everyone traveling around on eagles all the time?
But it looks as if business might be done. Stanley, you and I have agreed on our policy, art or cash. Either very profitable terms indeed, or absolute author's veto on objectionable features or alterations.
But even if the script was bad, Tolkien was still not completely opposed to making it, basically saying in this letter that he would even accept the bad story if they bought the rights for a lot of money. I like this mindset.
I should say Zimmerman, the constructor of the storyline, is quite incapable of excerpting and adapting the spoken words of the book. He is hasty, insensitive, and impertinent. He does not read books. It seems to me evident that he had skimmed through the Lord of the Rings at great pace and constructed his storyline from partly confused memories, and with minimum of references back to the original. Thus he gets most of the names wrong in form.
So it's questionable how serious this project even was, because it seems that the author of that storyline made a bunch of glaring mistakes, like he named the king of the eagles Radagast, even though that's one of the 5 wizards, and weird stuff like that. And Tolkien is the big language guy, and he really cares about the speaking style and the archaic old English-y style of his writing and dialogue. And if some American pretender comes along and writes a shitty version of that dialogue, Tolkien will not be impressed. I guess I'm pretty sure Tolkien would have really liked all the times in the Lord of the Rings movies when they directly, in the Peter Jackson ones, when they directly quote the books. Because every time that happens, suddenly everything feels correct and good, and the movie dialogue can be a little bit wonky. There's this hilarious scene in the making of the Hobbit Special Extended Edition, where, because of the fucked up production schedule of The Hobbit, nobody was knowing what to do on set and nobody had a script. So Sir Ian McKellen, the actor who portrays Gandalf, just pulled out his copy of The Hobbit and got the chapter that they were working on and just said, okay, we're just working with the script like it is in the book, okay? And they did, and it's like one of his best scenes of a movie because it's not written by Fran Welsh and Philippa Boyens and Peter Jackson, but from Tolkien.
Here we meet the first intrusion of the eagles. I think they are a major mistake of Zimmerman, and without warrant. The eagles are a dangerous machine. I've used them sparingly, and that is the absolute limit of their credibility or usefulness. The alighting of a great eagle of the Misty Mountains in the Shire is absurd, and it also makes the later capture of Gandalf by Saruman incredible and spoils the account of his escape.
So this is actually one of the most famous Tolkien quotes. In fact, multiple of these quotes are pretty well known and much discussed, because it answers the big question, why didn't Frodo just fly on the ring to Mordor on an eagle? Why didn't they just do that? It would have been so easy. Answer is, would have made a bad story. The eagles are literally a deus ex machina. They are a tool, and Tolkien is conscious of that and uses them sparingly. Well, in this proposed adaptation, they were basically flying around on eagles the whole time to save time, I guess, to make the story progress faster. That kind of makes sense if you want to press all 3 books into one movie. By the way, I wanted to actually make a video about the eagles flying to Mordor and how many canon explanations there are how that wouldn't work. But then I noticed that like everyone else on YouTube has already done a video on that. So I'm just gonna link one of these videos to my friends when they bring that up. Haha.
The landlord does not ask Frodo to register. Why should he? There's no police and no government. Nor do I make him number his rooms. If details are to be added to an already crowded picture, they should at least fit the story described.
This is a great advice for any adaptation, or in fact any kind of storytelling, I think. Because Tolkien's details are never pointless, and they always fit. They always have some kind of history or reveal something about the world and the characters that inhabit them. When they walk into the doors of Mordor and there's writing on the door that talks about the smith who made the door and who wrote these letters, the characters are actually characters in an earlier story that Tolkien wrote, and there's backstory and theming about it, because it actually hones back to an old relationship between elves and dwarves that isn't anymore, and the relationships and this relationship will be renewed by Legolas and Gimli later. But yeah, in this adaptation there's basically just a bunch of bullshit added without any sense or purpose. Contrasting it with Peter Jackson's movie trilogy, I think they did a very good job with all the details in the production design and also the script for the most part. I think Tolkien would have really enjoyed all the sets and all the artwork that was created for these movies, because it follows the same mindset of useful details that give the world depth and are not silly or feel tacked on.
The Black Riders do not scream, but keep a more terrifying silence.
That's one of the most interesting little bits, because if you know the Peter Jackson movies, the Black Riders scream a whole lot. They have this terrifying screech that is very scary, in fact. And I think they did the Black Riders and Nazgûls pretty well in these movies. But Tolkien would have probably not be as happy with that. This is a question if he really considered how that would work in an audiovisual medium, because I can't really imagine like a bunch of wooden figures being completely quiet as scary as the crunchy, screamy creeps from the Peter Jackson movies are. I think they work pretty well. But a terrifying silence, of course, sounds great in written words.
The narrative now divides into 2 main branches. First, prime action, the Ring Bearers. Second, subsidiary action, the rest of the company leading to the heroic matter. It is essential that these two branches should each be treated in coherent sequence, both to render them intelligible as a story and because they are totally different in tone and scenery. Jumbling them together entirely destroys these things.
So what Zimmerman apparently also did was that he jumbled together the Frodo and Sam storyline with the Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli and Merry and Pippin storylines, which just means he intercut between these two storylines, like the Peter Jackson movies do too. Tolkien wouldn't be a fan of that. I'm a fan of that. Because I was always very curious about the structure of the Lord of the Rings book. It's weird by today's storytelling standards, because you read the second book and you learn all about Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli and Merry and Pippin, and that all happens, and that is the first half of the book, and the entire second half is Frodo and Sam. You don't even hear about Frodo for half the second book. And same thing in Return of the King. Tolkien is very concerned about telling this whole story from beginning to end, the tale of this character, and then telling the tale of another character from his perspective at a different time, or at the same time. He doesn't like these stories happening simultaneously, which is what would happen in any traditional storytelling Hollywood movie. But Tolkien is of course not influenced by that, but by his Northern European myths and legends. He doesn't really consider these storytelling techniques. This is wonderful little chapter in The Children of Húrin, which is just called Beleg's Death, with Beleg being one of the main characters. So I think Tolkien doesn't really consider spoilers at all. That character just dies in this chapter, and you're gonna know that from the title of the chapter. Also considering that the two stories are thematically intertwined in the movie adaptations. Just remember Sam's speech at the end of The Two Towers, where Sam's speech to Frodo about the stories that are really important is intercut with the victory at Helm's Deep and the destruction of Isengard, which is one of the most legendary scenes from these movies that takes advantage of the audiovisual medium, that you can overlay a dialogue from a different scene over the actions of a completely other location that is many miles away. That won't work in a book. Well, I can't really imagine how it would work. So to me, the question at the end of all things is, would have Tolkien liked the Peter Jackson movies? Like I said, I think he would have a lot of respect for the artistry of all the weapons and sets and paintings and costumes and everything that went into that stuff. Would have also loved the New Zealand location and the New Zealand and Alps, which are basically the same thing as the European Alps, which inspired Tolkien a lot, because it's like the only mountains that he ever saw in his life. In these letters, Tolkien also mentions that he would actually be okay with cutting parts of the story, and he prefers cutting over mischaracterizing or mistreating parts or characters of the story. So he specifically mentions Helm's Deep and the Ents as something that could be cut in a movie adaptation, because in his mind it's not essential to the story of the ring, which is kind of true, but also that's like the entire second movie. But if the Peter Jackson trilogy would have been 1 or 2 movies like originally planned instead of 3, that could have actually happened. So I'm pretty sure he would have been okay with Tom Bombadil getting cut, because he's the definition of not story essential. But he really wouldn't have been a fan of all the changes to characters that the movies made, like making Gimli into a comedy relief character and stripping away a lot of his emotional depth from the books. These letters are full of very interesting details and advices that future adaptations of Tolkien's works should take to heart. Like, for example, Amazon's TV show, which will be based on basically nothing for the most part. So, we'll see. We'll see if the details they add to the world will make sense. Thanks for listening to my little ramble here. I'm NeverPaint. My voice has been broke for like a week. But I make some videos. I sometimes talk about anime, I sometimes talk about Tolkien, about movies, or about whatever I want to talk about. Click the links in the description, like and subscribe. You know how it works. You're a YouTube person.